Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie Johnson, and I just want to welcome you to this very special video presentation of our conversation with Avrohom Krauss. If you saw our first episode with him, he talked about the Landsmannschaften in New York City and how some of those particular Jewish cemeteries were organized. Then we had a second episode that followed up with some preservation at cemeteries in New York as well as in other parts of Europe. And he finally ended our conversation with some visits to Holocaust memorial sites. This particular video is a video only presentation. So if you've listened to us on your audio apps, such as Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, this was not available on the audio, as it really is a very visual presentation. There are photographs of the sites that Avrohom visited with his sons all across Europe as he discovered his genealogy and put together sort of a timeline of Jewish families in various parts of Europe leading up into World War II. So we hope you enjoy this very special video presentation, and we will see you in our next episode. As Diane always says, until we meet again.
Now we're going to take a little excursion to hop over the pond and go to Europe. We're starting off in France, in the charming village of Troyes.
Which is in like sort of the northern region of France there, close to...
Yeah, right below the Champagne region.
Yeah, just below Belgium.
And this town is known, well, it's known for a number of things, but the town is known in our books as being the birthplace and the residence of one of the foremost interpreter and commentator on the Torah, on the scripture, and also the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Solomon, the son of Isaac, and he's better known as Rashi. You may have heard of him. Mm-hmm. And this was I was when I was there, I was able to pray at the this is a monument that was put up in his honor. It is this globe is very interesting. It was written with his name in I forget how they say it. How that's it's a type of art, form, and it's marble based, and it's black and white, and it's very striking.
It is.
It is in the it's in what today is a parking lot, a square. There's a square, and it's a parking lot. And why is it there? Because it's on that spot was the old Jewish cemetery.
Oh, wow.
And Rashi lived in the 12th century, mm-hmm. And actually the place was forgotten over the years. Just recently, someone went and found the maps and found where the Jewish cemetery was, and it turns out it's there. There's like a plaza and a parking lot, and that's where this is. And it's a very old place for him, and he had an academy, which were very famous. The medieval scholars, him and his sons-in-law and his grandsons, and he only had. I had, I think, one son that died, but he had a few daughters, and it's from those that their whole empire of Talmudists where it came from him, and that was in Troyes, where he lived, and that's where they had their academy. I think they showed me when I was there on a tour that where the building was. And they even try to show us his house, but I understand not all the buildings not any of the buildings in the Jewish
Mm.
Quarter will still exist, but be that as may, it's a charming place. If anyone's been to France and has been there, it's cobblestone roads. It's beautiful. But this is the again, um, it, it's painful. I mean, it's good that at least I felt honored to be able to pray and visit that grave. It's one of the most important uh, spots that I could outside of Israel, but I feel it's a merit to have been there. But it's again, it's in a the cemetery's not there. I mean, it's hidden. So we're
Yeah.
talking about the forgotten, the unknown. It's not only people, they're places that were forgotten. There were places that become unknown, but we tried to retrieve. One of the things you'll see there, if you could see, and we'll show it better, there's on the floor, on the ground, the tile, the brick or whatever in front of the monument, there's a little canister, and those are memorial candles. We have
Oh,
memorial. I don't know if you're familiar with that. We have these. They're usually either a day, like 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. We have those that are used at times of for some people put them by grave, some people don't. But when we honor a person and when it's their anniversary of death, we put candles. We light candles, and they to last the entire day, the 24 hours. That's how we that's one of the things we do to honor them. And during the mourning period after someone is deceased, then there's a 7 day, so they have a 7 day candle. And so those are the types of things. So that you see someone put one there from a previous visit, and there were a number of them there.
mm-hmm.
Now we're going to go to east to the Czech Republic, to Prague. This is a portrait
Oh,
of the
what a
old,
gorgeous painting.
yeah, beautiful, of the old Prague Jewish cemetery, established in the 15th century. There's um, this is one of the oldest cemeteries, uh, Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and it's a very, very interesting and special place.
I think that cemetery gets mentioned in a lot of
Yes,
literature and stuff. You hear about this
yes,
cemetery.
yes. One of the things is that you could see the stones, the tombstones are basically on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is that the cemetery is on 10 or 12 tiers. The Jewish community was restricted. They didn't have place to bury. They had to bury, which is not the way that we bury, but traditionally we tried. They had no choice. They had to bury in levels. So
Mm.
they buried it, and they put the dirt, and made another
The
layer.
next one up. Yep.
And so the stones had to be raised as well if they wanted the stones to be there. I don't know whether all of them are. I can't believe that they are, but they had to bring up stones. So that's why there was not space. And if you go there, you'll see that the level of the cemetery is above the street level. And that's also the reason is, and they also have retaining walls also because they need to hold all the soil.
Right.
So that's the Prague Cemetery. But since it's there's some very notable um, people that were buried in the cemetery. Here's another view.
Oh,
Yeah, I think when
Um,
my son went to Prague, he sent me just one picture, but he's not into cemeteries. He was like, "This is a really neat cemetery. I thought you would like the picture." And then that was it. It's like, oh my God, go in there and take a picture of everything.
yeah, that
um,
yeah, this is very they call it a necropolis.
it really is
Um,
in this case.
um, this I just since we're talking about pointing out things, this happens to be the one in the foreground, the stone in the foreground has hands on top.
Yeah.
If you see those hands that are together,
Oh, yeah.
those are that is this person was of the priestly caste. There are we have different people by birth are born into different classes.
Right.
This is the priestly class. They're called Kohanim, and they bless the rest of the people with raised hands, as they did in the temple in Jerusalem.
Oh,
So to designate him as as from that clan, those typically will appear on his tombstone. And by the way, also in a Jewish cemetery, it's very common that the Kohanim are buried um, by the perimeter. And the reason for that is that they are not permitted to go on a cemetery, not be in contact with a dead person, except the only time they were able to go to a cemetery is for very close, certain seven close relatives.
Oh,
Otherwise, they don't go to the cemetery. So they typically will bury them close to the fence so that family members could visit them and stand outside as long as they're beyond the wall. So they were able to go
interesting.
and visit their relatives. So this way could be. I'm not exactly sure. I can't see whether there's the road nearby, but I doubt it. But a lot of cemeteries at least try to accommodate that. Here's this is a lion, and
Oh,
this is on a grave of a woman. It's not. It was actually for her husband. Usually, okay, this type of art became common, I think, in I'm going to say the 17th century. They made many ornate stones. Before that, stones were pretty simple. And since then, also, many stones are simple. But there was a certain phase in particular that you had these, I mean, intricate, like designs, these
yeah.
really sculptures. So here, this is from, I'm not sure it's the 17th century or
wow.
18th century. I'm not sure, but it is a lion, and so usually you would have a lion for a person that would have a name that means lion or is associated with a lion. The name's Judah, and the name uh, um, um, Leib, in Yiddish, refer to are associated or mean a lion, but that's not the case over here. This is a lion that her husband was the first Jew to be granted nobility in Prague.
Oh,
So that's why they gave him a coat of arms with, I guess, with a lion. And so that's on her grave. It's not over his grave because he died elsewhere, somewhere else, and was not buried there. But
I like the
uh,
facial expression on the lion. So if you're
oh
not
yeah.
able to see it, the lion, he almost looks like he's smiling a little bit, and his eyes actually look
Hmm.
kind of friendly, but he's sitting on his like haunches and he's holding the coat of arms with his front paws
Hmm.
in front of him. That's just a very interesting design. It's
Very
so
interesting.
cool though.
Here's a fish.
There's a fish.
Um, yeah, this is interesting. There's many different animals that are associated with some Jewish names, and one of them is the name of Ephraim, which is Ephraim in English, which is he was compared to fish in the Bible, him and his brother Menashe. In Jacob's blessings, it mentions that they should multiply like fish, and that probably is the reason for this motif on the
I
tombstone.
love how you
You
can
s-
see each little scale on
Oh
the
yeah,
Yeah,
fish
the
all the way
detail is
down.
amazing.
yeah. I mean, these are works of art. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt. And if you see in the foreground, you see a rock.
Uh-huh.
I didn't speak about that. Rocks are uh, if I get better pictures, you'll probably see it later. Rocks are when in tradition, Jewish tradition, we don't place flowers on a grave, but we do place rocks. And the reason the rocks is a marker to show that we visited. It visitation is something advantageous to the person. I'm sorry, I lost it.
The rocks last longer than the flowers.
Yes,
Yeah, they're not
Yes.
a mess.
Yeah, so we put rocks, and that's one rock there. But sometimes you will see them heaped with stones.
Mm-hmm.
Some say it goes back to the biblical story when Jacob buried Rachel on on the way to Bethlehem uh, in Ephrat. He went ahead and he says that he he placed a stone, uh, by her
Oh.
grave. He erected a stone, a tombstone. So like some say that that's like it's reminiscent of the fact that we also go ahead and we put a stone to in similar vein. This is the famous the grave of the
Wow.
famous Rabbi Judah Loewy called the Maharal of Prague. He was a rabbi in the 16th century and passed away at the beginning of the 17th. He was extremely influential leader. He was someone who wrote extensively in mysticism and other things. He was a Talmudist. He was there's a lot of legends that were told about him. So, you know, but he was a very great person, and he's probably the most well-known rabbi that's interred over here. If you look on this magnificent stone, you'll see there in the center, you'll see a lion.
Uh-huh.
Well, his name is Judah, and Judah is compared to the lion. Um, there's beautiful flowers. The floor. Do you see the leaves and on there?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot going on, and the columns and everything else here. Uh, you also, if you look very much at the top, I know that's what that is. It looks like a pine cone to me. I don't even know what it is, but you see the stones sticking
Uh-huh.
out. The
Hmm.
level below, you see stones.
Yep.
In between those little crevices, you see stones, 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 stones.
He has been
Um,
often visited.
yeah, and look at the floor,
Yeah, all
ground
around him.
all around.
But yeah, anywhere you could set a stone, there's a stone on his
Yep.
headstone.
Now we're going to move to Poland. First stop, Krakow. This is the famous Ramah Synagogue in Krakow. Those are my two sons, Yitzhak and Baruch, and I took them there with me, and they're standing under the archway to the courtyard of the synagogue. This is one of um, it's a very old. It's from his synagogue. It's from the 16th century, and atypically it has a cemetery, a graveyard in its premises, on its premises. Now I say atypically because that's I think the one in Prague may have also be, but that is not typical. Most of the time, Jewish cemeteries are acquired. The land is acquired outside of the city limits, usually not associated with the synagogue, and not on their premises. But
Differing
these
from the
two,
Christian religion where they
right?
would put them on the
Exactly,
sites of the
exactly.
churches.
Yeah, it's different. And so that's not done. So, but in certain instances, it was done, and this was the situation. I don't know whether that had to do with room or availability of land. I have no idea. But this is it says on the archway that this is the synagogue, the new synagogue of the Ramah of blessed memory. The Ramah, it's an acronym for his name. His name was Rabbi Moses Isserlis, and he was the chief rabbi of Krakow, and he was one of the most the Jewish law of the Ashkenazi Jews. Do I have to explain that? Does anyone know what an Ashkenazi Jew is?
You, I know we've
I
talked
should I
about it,
should
but you might
explain that.
refresh our memory on that one.
Okay, there's different groupings of it that, depending on geography, they're developed different traditions. I mean, well, let's start this way. Let's start off in observant Jewry, wherever you are, the worldwide, the basic tenets and is the same, but there are little variations in certain customs and certain laws, and really that depends on the communities that were developed. So when communities developed in Europe, they were called Ashkenazim. Those and the ones that were from Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, they were called Sephardim. And
Okay.
you had Jews from the Orient, like Middle East. Those are called Mizrahim, the Eastern Jews. And those are the basic categories. There's other categories, but it's basically cultural and where a person is from. The majority of today's Jews, 80% or more of world Jewry are Ashkenazim, that their roots are in Europe. I've been
Gotcha.
there for many, many years before. Oh, and actually the migrations, they say it traveled from Israel to Babylon, and Babylon they moved to to Spain and France, and then they moved eastward. There's questions how the groups the migration patterns, but that basically they developed different communities. And the Ramah, the Rabbi Israel is the who was the one that codified the Jewish law according to the Ashkenazi tradition. And so we basically follow his rulings. It's in the book of the Code of Law. So we follow his rulings. Here I am with my sons in front of the grave of this rabbi, and according to our family tradition and my genealogy, I would be 15 generations from him, and my children 16.
Cool.
Um,
And you can see all the rocks again in front of
All the
his grave.
rocks. Yeah, so here, elaborate tombstone with a epitaph, which was trying to capture. Yeah, his name was Moshe, which was Moses, and he was compared because of his ability to transmit the law. They compared him to the Moses of the generation.
Right.
mm,
Okay, now we move south in Poland to Przemysl, Poland, which is on the Ukrainian border today. This is one of my ancestral towns where our families on my father's side lived for a number of generations. And this is the old cemetery, how it looked
I was gonna
when
say
it,
that's an old photograph.
yeah, I didn't take that. I wish I would have seen the cemetery like that. This is how the cemetery when I found
mm,
it, when my first
Oh,
visit to Poland. They have, we have archways to cemeteries.
right.
This is what was left, a defaced, graffitied archway to a cemetery, which is a field. The
Yeah, all the
stones, I was
stones are
told
gone.
by my guide at the time, um, I guess was too embarrassed to really tell me what happened. He said that the stones sunk into the ground and this and that. Of course, I've later researched, and the stones were taken. They were
Mhm.
stolen and used as pavement, and which was not uncommon in Eastern Europe. They stole the stones, and that's what we were left with. Here we are in the area of where the cemetery was. We at least try to pay our respects to all the generations of my family that were buried here in the old cemetery. And this was recently done. At least they try to clean it up a bit.
Yeah.
They put up a plaque designating it. Meanwhile, we had to sort of guess. Oh, when I got there, I look. Oh, that must have been the entrance to the cemetery. Well, now we have at least they put up a marking, and they put up a signage, to tell you that that's the old cemetery. This cemetery was started. This would have been, if it was like the way you saw it in that old photo,
Mm-hmm.
if it would have remained like that with its tombstones, that would have been on par in one of the oldest cemeteries in Europe, the
Wow.
Jewish cemeteries in Europe, like the cemetery in Prague. You're talking about 15th century,
Right.
when the first burials were done, and Krakow is also very early as well.
I'm pleased to see that
So
they were able to even get some of the graffiti off of the archway. I
yeah,
mean, there's a
yeah, they
little bit of
tried.
paint left, but
You could see they tried, but there's another thing about, while we're on the subject of graffiti, and that I'm sure that that people know, that when things are left in disrepair, so that they sort of attract all the bad behavior. Once you
yep.
go ahead and you clean up a little bit, it usually helps people to treat it differently. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it won't get rid of all the problems, but once you see it's a little bit respectable, then people treat it differently. If you go ahead and you just leave it, then it just gets worse. People have no regard.
Right.
So that's just tendencies. But we went to the new cemetery in Przemysl, and that is, as you could see, at least still a cemetery.
What a gorgeous gate.
Yeah, yeah, these cemeteries. This, by the way, the other one was in a different area. This, by the way, which was, I think, not so uncommon, um, that this property was. It's right next to the Christian cemetery. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's Catholic. And it seems to be is it looks like one. There's the walls dividing, but it's like one continuous. It's like this whole area is cemetery,
Right.
like goes on and on. It's this huge area cemetery. It's like the cemetery center. So it's they each have their own gate, and they're those divided. But
It's
so
like
this is the new
Evergreen Cemetery.
cemetery. Huh?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I was like, it's just like Evergreen where Diane's at. The Jewish cemetery is right next to the
Mm-hmm.
other part of, and there's a wall that separates them, gates that separate them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's all one big
Right.
burial ground.
It seems to be that sort of became popular. I guess they sold land in the same area, and they made designated, maybe the city designated it. But
Yeah.
whatever it is, this is there.
Oh.
See, this is what these cemeteries are, more like forests.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, there's no one there. There's no Jewish community to take care of it. Things are
Right.
overgrown. It's the tombstones again. This is the same deplorable conditions that we're showing. Um, I thought on the other hand, like, don't I want to show them something, something really nice? But you could always see nice cemeteries, and in the United States, you want to see and get an idea of what is the reality. And even with all this, you see the beauty, and you see that there are some things that are still there,
For sure.
and you do what you can. And there are organizations now of people internationally that try to restore or do what they can, make fences around try to protect the Jewish cemeteries.
Sure.
So there's a lot of good work going on, but it's massive. You're talking about um, the Ashkenazi Jews were in Europe for like 1,000 years.
Right.
So we were there a
That's
thousand years
many
before we were.
generations of people.
Yeah, 1,000 years before, the terrible, annihilation. But there was a lot of burials, a lot of years, and a lot of history, and
Yeah.
most of which has been, destroyed. But here we go. This is another
Mm.
view. This is me and my son trying to find something. I wasn't successful. I know this is the new cemetery, so I was expecting to maybe find, not expecting, but hoping of hopes, maybe I could find someone more in the recent past.
Are there any written records that record who's buried there and their location?
Not that I'm aware of. There
Yeah.
were ledgers that were available in the towns, and most of those were destroyed. The civil records do, if you could get them, and they do exist, not for all years, but I have found, when, the date of death, and that's about it. In this area, you see, you have to know, that's a whole different topic for genealogists. You have to know that in this area, this is southern Poland. It was Poland didn't exist for around 200 years, from 1772, I think it is, until World War I. There was no Poland. Poland was
Right.
divided between three countries: Russia, Germany, and Austria. And one time it was Prussia, and so the southern they had of course the Polish people and the Polish culture was there, but the governing bodies were either Russian or German, basically, and Austrian. And so this part was Austrian. So I was always told that, they came from Austria. I knew it was Galicia. I knew it wasn't anywhere near Austria. It was under the Austrian Empire. This is southern Poland, but this area was governed by Austria, and the civil records were kept in German. Sometimes they were bilingual with Polish as well. But in this area, the death records were very sparse. They just tell you the date, at least in this area, in Przemysl, the records that I have seen tell you the name of the person, don't sometimes a spouse, and they don't even give the parents' names in the death certificates.
Yeah.
Marriage certificates really are good because they give you not only the parents, but they'll also give you grandparents' names as well.
Oh,
So,
that's
but
helpful.
if you could find them, but they're not for every year. So you can know that they died, but you don't have any clue where they're buried. But the Jewish community, had the Jewish community still existed, you would go into the Jewish community, they would take out their ledgers, and they would probably be able to tell you. But
Right.
that's gone. And even if they wouldn't be able to tell you where, the caretaker would know. There's thousands. He would know. He would take you to the area. That's for sure. They were they were very familiar with these things. But like I say, there's no one to go to. Here is a Holocaust memorial for those who weren't buried there, but the family in America, at a foundation, they put this up. And you see there, again, the stones, even though they're not, that they don't know exactly where
Right,
they're
where they're
buried.
at.
And they're probably not in the cemetery. They were probably, most of the people in that area were either shot or went to Belzec, extermination camp, in this area. Here's a close-up in Polish and in English. And notice how they say the victims of German Nazi terror. There's no mention of the locals who were collaborators.
Right.
That's unfortunately, but they're coming. A lot of they say there's especially with the younger generation, there are more people that are coming to terms with their own involvement, and so here's another place which is hometown of where actually my grandfather was born, in a place called Rozvidov, and now it was incorporated into the city of Stalowa Wola, and this is the train station. Why did we go to the train station? Well, we wanted to go to a cemetery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they said it was on, where is it? Where was it? Oh,
About where the
it's over
tracks
the
are.
other side other side over there of the trees. So we did the best we could, and we went over to the area and prayed a little bit there. And that's the extent of the cemetery, quote unquote. Now we move on to another town in Poland called Leszczyńsk. And this is a very famous, there was a Rabbi Elimelech of Leszczyńsk, and he is buried in that town where he lived. He was a Hasidic master, a person who people went to not only to learn, but also to um, for advice and for they believed that he could do wonders, and they very common for those rabbis to have a structure built over their grave. So his grave is inside this building. In Hebrew, it's called an ohel. It's not an individual grave. They make a whole. It's not. I wouldn't call it a mausoleum or something like that building, because the body is buried in the ground, like all of the Jewish tradition is to bury the body in the ground. But there's an area there where they have the stone and places where people could gather and pray. Here is the actual gravestone. You'll see two interesting things, I'm sure, that you may not have seen before. There's a gate around his tombstone, and that's I didn't ask, but I believe they did that for protection. There are thousands upon thousands of people that come there, and they didn't want damage to be done, and they wanted to cordon off, so the police, we have thousands of people trying to get into that room, and each one wants to get up as close as they can to the grave. So that's a recipe for frankly danger, and also damage to the grave. And you'll see another interesting thing over here. You see that there's pieces of paper. Now these papers are little prayers, little requests that, just like in his lifetime, people went to, and they wanted him to pray on their behalf for children, for the life, to get a healthy clean bill of health, all types of things. They would go to him. So also after death, they pray to God in that area, but they leave little notes many times. In the Hasidic tradition, people do that. And you'll see the grave is full with it. It's also done, by the way, at the Western Wall. If you've ever seen pictures that people put little notes by the Western Wall. Here is the view from the distance. There, my son is up front, up close, and you see the notes. But underneath, you'll see the candles that I mentioned. You have the little lamps, and you have little tea light types of things that go out, and the people do that for the soul is compared to a candle. So you'll see a lot of that. On the right side, in that little niche, you'll see a charity box. That's for people to put in charities. Also, something which is done as well. There's something above the gate on top. There's what looks to me like filled with oil. It's probably something that's probably I can't see it. It's probably lit, and they probably fill that up all the time to make sure that there's always at least one light always lit in that area. And you see one side is, you see my son is standing on the opposite side is a woman. So they have they have different sides for the men and the women. Now we go to the capital of Poland, modern Poland, that is, and that's Warsaw. Here I am with my son walking in front of the cemetery, which is one of the largest. It's I'm gonna say 200,000, 250,000 burials in here. And it's a miracle that it wasn't destroyed, because Warsaw was flattened. Warsaw was flattened to the extent that there were people that were in favor of not even rebuilding it. I read that recently. But for some reason, the Jewish cemetery, I mean, a lot of the Jewish, get everything. The synagogues, there's only like one synagogue or so left, which I happened to attend when I was there. But it's a miracle that this was not destroyed.
You can see it all up into the trees there.
Yeah, here we are in front of the cemetery. And this says that this is the original gate. Okay. And they put a picture of it, how it looked at the time of the ghetto. You know, Warsaw was famous for the Warsaw Ghetto.
Right.
Um, talk more about that later. So here is the inside of that cemetery. This part, look, it's beautiful. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's so beautiful that, I mean, you have people, unfortunately, I mean, this is from, it's in terms of, um, we saw many people that weren't visiting graves. They were using the cemetery as a park
Mm.
and walking their dogs and things of that sort. Um, obviously, I would assume in probably every tradition that's, you know, not something to do, but it's a desecration of a holy space. But um, it's done, and like I say, to no one's around to take care of the cemetery, so it's used by many as like a park. In a certain sense, you understand why. It's beautiful, it's serene, um, and if you're on the main paths, you're okay. Here, going a little bit deeper into, and here you see like the extent of these trees. I mean, it becomes a forest, but here at least the stones are still looks they look intact. And I get a little bit deeper, and you see what's going on here. How many of the tombstones are totally covered with ivy and all types of overgrowth here. We were trying to find a certain a certain building where rabbis were, and my son had remembered where they were. It was his second time. It was, I think, my first time. He had gone on a trip before previously. Here is that room where two great sages that were the heads of the pre the uh, it's called the mother of yeshivas. It's the academy of which the Lithuanian type of academies for Talmudic study all stem from this institution. Was in the town, the Belarusian town of Volozhin, and here the two heads of the institution, the Rabbi Berlin and his son and grandson-in-law. In other words, his grandson married his granddaughter, but they he was much younger, obviously, but they both were traveling and ended up dying in Warsaw. Where a lot of people came for medical treatments because that was the center, and you have a lot of people that were from other areas that are buried. So that's why people come to Warsaw. They're not only seeing the great figures and the important people of Warsaw. A lot of times they're seeing people from all over because the Poland, if they could get to Warsaw, they got there, and if they died in those days, they didn't transport the body. It was not like today where you could transport bodies, a distance. It wasn't really done, and also it was also preferred. The Jewish burials are preferably done as soon as possible, and if they're especially notables, if the person dies in that town, the town says, like, we're the ones that if he died here, then we merited for them to be here, and that's where we have a priority and as to where they're buried, and we want them buried here. So this is the inside. It's not so clear, but again, you could see the candles and you could see the petitions. This is perhaps the most interesting in the cemetery. This is a tombstone from someone who was called Koppelmoel. His last name was Vitelzon. He was Jacob of Vitelzon. He was, if you look at the top of the stone, that gives you an idea. You see hands holding
I can't quite tell what it's holding.
Sword?
it's a knife,
A
but
knife. Okay.
it's a very special knife. It's a circumcision knife.
Oh,
He was a ritual circumciser.
I was going to say, now we know what his job was.
Yes. He passed away in 1924. He was over 60 years at his profession and circumcised over 6,000 baby boys.
Wow.
And so here he has on his tombstone the hands with the knife, and you see in front of the tombstone is a bench. That bench is where it's supposed to symbolize. That's the bench where the he's called the Sandik. I guess in English you would probably refer to him as a godfather. He would sit and hold the baby for the circumcision.
Okay.
Um, and there's two seats there. Uh, one is for the like I say, the one upon whose lap the boy is circumcised, and the other one is a designated seat for Elijah, the prophet, who comes to join in the ceremony. This is also again just these were stones that were taken from the cemetery, retrieved, but again, this is a ongoing theme, as you will see in the cemeteries, tombstones that were taken. Some of them were retrieved. Who knows where they were really supposed to go, but they leave them there, I guess, as a way. And here's my son by the pump. This is a water pump on the outside of cemeteries. The tradition is to wash one's hands as one exits a cemetery. There's a ritual, there's a cup, and there's a method in how we wash our hands upon leaving a cemetery. Cemeteries are on the one hand, they're holy places. On the other hand, any contact, any being in the area of a dead person has an impurity to it, and then that's why we wash our hands. This is in the cemetery.
Whoa.
You see these huge designated areas with stones upon them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you could guess what they are.
I can guess. I hate to think what I'm guessing, but
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, I guess you're right. I'll say the unsayable. These are mass graves.
Yeah.
These were pits where the Warsaw Ghetto, if you know the fate of the Warsaw Ghetto,
Yep.
there was an uprising, but over the years, what did they say, 92,000? I don't know how much, like 100,000 people. So they were thrown into these giant pits.
Mm.
And at least these are in a cemetery. I mean, but this is
I don't know that
where
that's any more comforting.
no, right. Except that hopefully it's protected in some way, but it's a terrible thing. And I couldn't stop seeing the contrast between the ideas of what we started off talking about, the Hebrew Burial Association saving people from Potter's Field, where people were also put in mass graves, but there they had at least a coffin.
Right.
And as terrible as it is, and but you hear people here who didn't even have the minimum dignity offered to them, but at least their memories are they're remembered in this way. In
Yes.
at least they designated this area for where the mass graves were to be found.
Mm.
Let's now travel to Lithuania. Lithuania, there's a forest, Panari Forest in Lithuania. And this is a stone, a memorial stone, which you see you know what a menorah is? Do I have to explain what a
Mhm.
menorah is?
Yep.
A menorah, yeah. So that's the symbol on the bottom of this. It's a menorah. It talks about, it is written in Hebrew and in Yiddish, and says 70,000 people are buried here.
Mm.
But between 70,000 and 100,000. So this was, it's not so clear, and probably is better off that way. This is the way this were pits where people were seeing their end.
Yeah.
And they had to dig them, of course. This, they recently found that there was a tunnel that people actually, when they were inside these pits, there was actually someone or a number of people who tried to escape through a tunnel.
Whoa.
But that, I'm sorry, that's so that is Panari Forest. I was there, and it was also like a sunny, beautiful day. You walk to get to these graves. You're walking through this beautiful forest, these tall trees, and you know, it's like surreal. You're in this area, and like it's so peaceful. The sun's out, nature all around you, and then you get to the point, and then you go to these pits where 70 to 100,000 people were shot and or buried alive.
We thank you for taking time to join us today for these ordinary, extraordinary stories. To learn more about the stories we shared, please visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you will find the resources we used to research this episode.
And please don't forget to visit us on social media, where we share all kinds of cemetery photos, quotes, tidbits, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, and on X, formerly Twitter, at OrdExtraCem. If you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our website. Your positive reviews and enthusiasm for our show help others who love cemeteries and history to discover us and our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
Until we meet again.